Hi there. Thank you for joining me. My name's Sarah. This is a story about my marriage to a Mormon cop who was living a secret double life and the covert and overt narcissistic abuse he inflicted. The story covers the last 4 years of our 39-year marriage. It begins in late 2018 with my visit, my very first time, to a psychic medium. And during that remarkable visit, I learned a lot of things. Several things I suspected were in fact true. A few I feared were also true. But even more than that, there were things I'd never even imagined, and it changed my whole life. The story ends in early 2023 when I escape him, the state of Utah, and I head east, where I have been safe and regaining my health and strength. And that's why I'm able to tell you my story today. A little background information. He was a longtime cop in California, where we lived, where I'm from, Northern California. We were very active Mormons with 4 children, and the both of us participated in many things in their school, church, and sports lives. For all intents and purposes, we looked like a busy, happy family. But right around 2016, there was an event that happened that kind of woke me up. It brought to my conscious mind the realization that something with him was very, very wrong. One day in early 2016, he came home from his law enforcement job, and the minute he walked in the door, I knew he was different. He looked horrible. He looked like a cadaver is all I can say. There was no color in his face. His eyes were just black marbles. His voice was just fractious and weak. Even the way he walked, it was like he was waterlogged wood. It was chilling. I got full body goosebumps. Even the dogs we had at the time were just approached him as if he were kind of a stranger. I knew right away something was wrong. He even smelled differently. So I confronted him about this and what was wrong. And eventually, after a minute or two, he did tell me that something had happened at work. It was an incident that happened. He thought he was going to be exonerated, and he was in fact investigated. It took 4 months. During that time, he began having night terrors, absolutely awful night terrors. He would scream, shout, yell, and be physically combative, whereas he'd never had a night terror before. We'd been married close to 30 years at this point, never had one. It got to the point where I had to move to another bedroom. I was punched and kicked. He even fell out of bed and broke a lamp and an end table, injured himself. And it was night after night. And in these night terrors, he was absolutely terrified, in fear for his life, screaming and yelling things like I'd never heard him. And he was swearing, and it seemed like he was in a group of people and he was being set upon, and he was somehow being attacked, because the fear in his voice in these night terrors was real. And these were memories. This wasn't a nightmare where your brain makes it up. These were memories. It was absolutely, absolutely terrible. Also, from that point on, he seemed to become more cold and distant. He just wasn't as affectionate and friendly. And lastly, the most chilling thing, I guess maybe not the most, but it would become the most chilling aspect of this change, is that when I would ask him what happened, he had this rehearsed speech he would give me, just short and sweet, but word for word. This was early 2016 this happened, and even until right before I moved away from Utah, he was still citing the same exact script, word for word, to a police detective. Many years down the line, 6 years down the line from this incident, he would be talking to a domestic violence investigator detective, and he would do the same thing to her, word for word speech. So that woke me up, and just, it was a red flag I didn't ignore or suppress. It was in my face, and I took note. I clocked it, you could say, and it became the filter through which I saw everything else from January 2016 on. So I'm going to give you even more background. That was 2016. Let's go back a little further. In 2013, I was enrolled in college. I was 51. I'd worked for 7 semesters at a junior college to get the grades I needed to go to my dream school, a major university in Northern California. I got a full academic scholarship. I am really literally living my best life. I'd worked very hard for it. I'd stayed home for over 20 years, raising kids, a husband, everything. And this was my time, and I was just crushing it. I was on the dean's high honor roll. I was scheduled to graduate in another year and a half, cum laude. It was amazing. I was just having the greatest time. I'd ride my bike all over campus, and I was actually getting physically in shape. In fact, I hadn't been in such good shape since the 90s. It was just going well. I was just thrilled. Things were really going my way. And then one day at the beginning of the final quarter at the school, I was on the quarter system, I started to notice something different in my body. I got up for school like I always do. I stepped out of bed, and when my feet hit the ground, it felt like every bone in my feet was shattered. My hands were swollen, and they also felt like all the bones were broken. Immediately, I just crumbled in pain on the ground. I was crying. I got up, went to the bathroom. I just knew something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. As the days went on and the weeks went on, I noticed I could no longer remember the foreign language words I was learning. One of my majors was in a foreign language where I was excelling tremendously. I went from learning 50 new words about every 10 days, 12 different grammar concepts every 10 days, and getting straight A's, to being hardly able to remember what I'd already learned and unable to retain the new information. It was shocking. I was having a lot of difficulty riding my bicycle around campus, which you cannot navigate this campus without a bicycle. It's huge. I was out of wind. I couldn't get my breath. Just things seemed to have taken a very sudden turn. In 6 years' time, I'll learn why from a psychic medium. So I quit college. I had to drop out. I couldn't function anymore. Saw a lot of specialists. Mainly the consensus was I have severe mold allergies. I have to get out of California. If I'm not going to go to the beach and live at the beach, I need to live in the desert, somewhere where there's no mold, no airborne mold. Okay, so we move. We move next door to Nevada. He gets a job transfer. I go through a really intensive diagnosis process where I see a special rheumatologist. I see an immunologist. And between the two of them, they took over 30 vials of blood. Their diagnosis and consensus was that I had an immunodeficiency disease, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, anxiety, and depression. I was put on some medications for these. Also, mainly it was human plasma infusions I began to receive. Every Sunday, I got human plasma infusions to help my immune system, and they really helped me in pretty much everything. They helped with pain, inflammation. They really did a great job. We're very fortunate we had the insurance to cover that kind of a thing. If we didn't, it would have been a cost at over $60,000 a year. So I recognized at the time and still today what a blessing that was and how appreciative I am of that insurance. It was through his job. I did not work. I tried to return to college a few years later, like about 2.5 years later. And again, I just wasn't strong enough. I did really well academically. From the neck up, I did great. But my body just couldn't do it.